Hello everybody, this is Module 1, Lesson 13. We are finding equivalent ratios given the total quantity. So we'll talk about that in a minute, what that means. Your essential question is, how can we use tables to find an equivalent ratio of two partial quantities, that means amounts, given a part-to-part ratio and the total of those amounts? So that might sound kind of confusing. This is going to feel like a pretty new lesson to you. So once you have that written down, unpause it and we're going to move on. We're actually going to skip example 1 entirely. I don't like it. I don't think it works out right. I'm not a big fan of starting with something that could confuse you. So what we are going to do is skip on over to page 52. So if you're looking at example 2, we see that there's a business who buys a fast food franchise, and it's also buying the recipes used at every restaurant. Okay, so if you've ever ordered from a chain like Papa John's or Pizza Hut, they have recipes that they use to make it, be consistent across different locations. So, for example, this place, Pizzeria Specialty House Restaurants, has different owners, but they all use the same recipes. You are now working at your local pizzeria specialty house, and listed below are the amounts of meat used on one Meat Lovers pizza. So if you notice, there's a bunch of different kinds of meats here. We've got sausage, pepperoni, bacon, ham, and beef. It looks like some of them are used more than others. Like 1/8 is clearly going to be less than these other ones. It looks like 1/3 pepperoni is going to be our most. You should pay attention real quick that there is the same amount of ham and beef. That's going to come up later. Okay, so what I want you to do is pause the video and add these fractions up. When you add 1/4 into your calculator, on the last video, I showed you what the calculator should look like. So when you type in 1/4, type 1, and then in your calculator, you should hit that ABC button that we talked about, and it gives you this little backwards L. So I'm going to show you real quick because I looked it up on their website to see. It should be this little guy right here. See how that's like a little backwards L? So when you type that in, use that ABC button. Sorry, I'll show you that real quick. That's right there. And then zoomed in a little. That's going to be your good friend for this whole thing. So what I want you to do is type that in. So you should see 1/4 plus 1/3. Now keep going until you add up all of those. Pause it and then unpause it to see what you got. Okay, when you added up all 5 ingredients, did you get 1 cup? That might have looked weird on your calculator. You're thinking, I just typed in all those numbers and it gives me the number 1. Yes, you did it correctly if you got 1. Okay, now what we want to talk about is using that ratio for different sized orders. What we see down here is that there are different orders taking place here. The meat must be mixed using this ratio to ensure that all customers receive the great tasting Meat Lovers pizza from every pizzeria specialty house restaurant nationwide. Okay, so just think of like your Papa John's, your Pizza Hut. If you order, Meat Lovers at one place, it should taste like Meat Lovers at another place. If you order, a bunch of pizzas, then you should have the same ratio whether it's on 1 pizza or 5 pizzas. So what we're going to figure out is that there's 3 different orders here for Meat Lovers on Super Bowl Sunday. So in order number 1, it tells us that we're going to have 1 cup of sausage. But if you notice up here, each pizza only uses a 1/4 cup of sausage. So we want to think real quick, how are we going to go from 1/4 cup to 1 whole cup? Are you thinking how many 1/4 cups you would need for a whole cup? It's 4. So for order number 1, we are going to multiply all the ingredients by 4. So for pepperoni, type into your calculator 1/3 times 4. You can pause it if you need to, but if you're typing in 1/3 times 4, well, we're going to have 4 of those, so it's going to be 4/3. If your calculator gave you 1 and 1/3, that's the same thing. So don't get confused just because one's a mixed number and one's an improper fraction. Okay, pause it and take each one of these ingredients and multiply them by 4. I want you to fill in bacon and beef. Go ahead and fill in bacon and beef. So multiply those ingredients times 4. They already did ham for you. Okay, if you've done that and unpaused it, you should have gotten 2/3, which is 4/6, just reduced. And then with beef, you got 1/2. All we did was take these numbers, 1/8 times 4, 1/6 times 4. So we did everything times 4 for order 1. In a minute, we're going to add these numbers up, and say how many total cups of meat we need for that order. Okay, for now, let's move on to order 2. Let's try to figure out what all these missing pieces are for order 2. The only one they give us here is bacon. So if they gave us bacon as 1, let's go back up to bacon here. In one pizza, it's a 1/6 cup of bacon. And down here we have a whole cup of bacon. So how many 1/6 cups would we need for one whole cup? Hopefully you said times 6. We need 6 of those. So now I am going to have you pause it. I want you to fill in all the others. So take 1/4 times 6, 1/3 times 6, 1/8 times 6, 1/8 times 6. Fill them all in where they go. Remember, when you type in a fraction like 1/8 times 6, this is what you're typing in your calculator. So it should look like this. That means 1/8 times 6. Okay, pause it and then see what you got for order 2. Okay, did you get 1/2, 2, 3/4, and 3/4? If you got one wrong, go back and fix it. Make sure that you're multiplying the fraction by 6. Okay, order 3 is a little trickier. We want to know, can we use that same concept for pepperoni? Because pepperoni is the only one they gave us. Well, they did give us beef, but 1 1/8, I don't know, that's a little tricky to deal with. But 3 sounds easier to deal with. So look at the pepperoni. Pepperoni says 1/3 cup, 1/3 cup. Be careful though, because this doesn't just say 1 cup of pepperoni, it says 3 whole cups of pepperoni. So first think, how many 1/3 cups to make a whole cup? So 1/3 cup times 3 gives me 1 whole cup. Then I can multiply by 3 to get 3 cups. So altogether, I was multiplying by 9. I'm going to show you one other way to do that. If I know that I need 3 cups of pepperoni, I can do 3 cups of pepperoni divided by 1/3 cup of pepperoni. And if you do that in your calculator, it would be the same thing that we've been doing. You would just do 3 divided by 1/3. We're figuring out how many thirds are in 3 wholes. And hopefully, if you understood my explanation up top, or if you understood my explanation here, you should have gotten 9. So this last one is going to be times 9. Okay, now go for it. Go ahead and multiply all of your ingredients times 9 and fill them in. You only have 3 to do actually. So pause the video, fill them in, and see how you did. Okay, did you get 2 1/4, 1 1/2, 1 1/8? If you're having trouble, it's probably because you're having trouble with the fractions in your calculator. So you've got to ask me for help so I can show you how to use the fraction button. Okay, now what we're going to do is add up all of the ingredients for order 1 and write that number here. Add up all the ingredients for order 2 and write that here. Then finally add up all the ingredients for order 3 and write that here. Now pause it and do that. So you're adding them up, same way we've been using the fraction button. You can be estimating along the way too. You know, some of these have whole numbers or it's 1 1/2. Go ahead, add them up and see what you get. Okay, hopefully you did that. And of course, that's to benefit you. So hopefully you learned something just now. And let's see how you did. Did you get the numbers 4, 6, and 9? Those should look familiar. Those should look familiar. So let's go ahead and answer the green question first. I want you to add these into your book. What do you notice about the total cups? In fact, why don't I just switch these? What do you notice about the total cups? 4, 6, and 9. Did you see those numbers anywhere else? Yes, they're right here. Those are our multipliers. And think about it. It was 1 cup for just one pizza. So of course it's going to be times 4, times 6, and times 9. So I need 4 cups of meat for order 1. I need 6 cups of meat for order 2. And I need 9 cups of meat for order 3. So what did you notice about the total cups? The total cups are equal to our multiplier for that order. Okay, and then what should be true about ham and beef? I asked you earlier. hopefully you're seeing this is 1/8 cup and this is 1/8 cup. So look across the board, 1/2 and 1/2, 3/4 and 3/4, 1 and 1/8 plus 1 and 1/8. So since ham and beef are the same in the one pizza example, they should always be the same amount for every order. They should always be equal amounts. Okay, let's move on to the next exercise. This one's a little different because we not only have a mac and cheese example with cups of noodles and cups of cheese, it then says the pan size, the number of cups total. So the number of cups total. So what this is saying is there's 6 different pan sizes to be used to make the macaroni and cheese. If the ratio stays the same, how might the recipe be altered to account for the different pan size? So real quick, what we're going to do is we're going to add the noodles and the cups to get the pan size. This is the only example that they give us the cups, the noodles and the cheese. So those are the main 2 ingredients for mac and cheese. So let's go ahead and add those together and put them here for the pan size. So 3 3/4 is the total. Now what we need to do is determine how did we go from the noodles to the cheese, and how do we go from the cheese to the pan size? I want you to pause this and divide. This is going to look a little weird because the first thing you're going to do is 3/4 divided by 3. And then the next one you're going to do is 3 3/4 divided by 3/4. So the first answer you're going to get is because we want to know how did we go from the noodles to the cheese. So go ahead and do 3/4 divided by 3. Okay, hopefully you got 1/4 because from the noodles to the cheese, we're actually taking 1/4. So 1/4 of 3. See, this would be times 1/4 times 1/4 times 1/4. So we're just going to keep going down the line here. I think that might help for you to see that from the noodles to the cheese is times 1/4. Okay, go ahead and multiply these two times 1/4. Go ahead and do 2/3 times 1/4, 5 1/3 times 1/4, and fill in what you got here. Okay, that was a pause time, so hopefully you paused it and you kept going. So this should be 1/6, and then this one should be 1 1/3. So all we really did was take 1/4 of these, which means multiply by 1/4. Okay, we still have some other ones to fill in here. This one we can't really do yet because I don't know anything. And then same thing down here. This one, I bet you could do this. Something times 1/4 gives me 1/4. So something times 1/4 gives me 1/4. Or you could work backwards. If this is like basically dividing by 4, you could take this and multiply by 4 to work backwards. So 1/4 times 4, that gives me 4. And you can double check that by saying 4 times 1/4. Okay, and there you go. It does work out. The next thing we need to figure out, I'm going to switch colors here. I'm going to do red. The next thing we need to figure out is how did I get from 3/4 to 3 3/4? That's what this problem is right here. I'm basically saying what did I multiply 3/4 by to get 3 3/4? The reason we need to do that is because if you're looking at 5 5/8 and 5 as a whole, well, I can't add up the noodles and the cheese to get the pan size. I can't add up the noodles and the cheese to get the pan size. I don't know what it is. But I can figure out how did I go from 3/4 to 3 3/4 by dividing. So if you divided that, hopefully you got 5. Did you get 5? It's because I'm multiplying by 5 to go from the cheese to the pan size. This is times 5, this is times 5, this is times 5. Whatever that is times 5. That's great and all, except that I still don't know what the cheese is. So from the pan size to the cheese, I know that I multiplied by 5. So you have to be able to work backwards here. The inverse is dividing by 5. Dividing by 5. So 5 divided by 5 goes here. And 5 5/8 divided by 5 would go in right here. Okay, so go ahead and divide that, and hopefully you get 1 1/8. The good news here is now, look, now I can do the inverse and I can multiply by, oh, and I'm so sorry, I have to fix something here. We're going to go back and fix this one in just a second. 1/4 of 1. 1/4 of 1. I told you to double check it, and I made that mistake. So 1/4 of 1 is 1/4. I'm really sorry. That's because here I have a whole cup, and I'm working backwards. So if I'm going to multiply this by 4, I get 4. I get 4. Okay, now do 1 1/8 times 4. Do 1 1/8 times 4. Okay, if you did multiply that by 4, you should have gotten 4 1/2. So again, we're working backwards, and you can always check it. Do 4 1/2 times 1/4, and then do 1 1/8 times 5. If you add the noodles and the cheese, you should get the pan total. And look at that. What's 4 plus 1? 5. Now go ahead, you just have 3 more to fill in. So pause it, and what you're doing now is you're adding the noodles with the cheese. The noodles with the cheese. Okay, you can pause it, but I'm going to keep moving down the line here. So 2/3 plus 1/6, add those together. And then the last one is 5 1/3 plus 1 1/3. Okay, so that one was a lot of work. Now, when you do the independent practice in class, that's okay. You're going to ask as many questions as you want, and we're going to look for easy patterns. So once you have this done, I'm just going to show you a quick preview on these ones. So we're going to be looking for patterns, and there's going to be easier ways to figure out how do the numbers relate to each other. This one with the macaroni and cheese was really tough because we were dealing with fractions, whole numbers, we were working forward and backwards. But if you're getting better at using your calculator fraction button, you should be doing much better. Okay? All right, we're going to stop the video here, and then you can do the summary on your own time, and we'll practice and take questions during our next class.